Some chapters of history are written in riddles with no answers. This video explores 25 historical mysteries that no one can explain, stories where the evidence runs cold and the truth remains just out of reach. By the end, you will gain a new perspective on the gaps in our collective memory and the astonishing puzzles that redefine what we think is possible. How did an entire colony vanish, leaving only a single word behind? What is the purpose of a 2,000-year-old device considered the world's first computer? We are about to journey through tales of vanished cities, indecipherable codes, and events that defy logic. Each mystery is a reminder that our past is not a neatly solved equation, but a landscape of shadows and whispers. What do you believe is the most compelling proof that we have forgotten more history than we have ever learned? Our journey begins with a silent settlement on the edge of a vast, unfamiliar continent. In 1587, a group of English settlers, including men, women, and children, established the Roanoke colony on an island off the coast of what is now North Carolina. It was a venture filled with ambition, meant to secure England's claim in the New World. Yet when a supply ship finally returned in 1590, after being delayed by conflict for 3 long years, the scene that greeted the crew was one of profound silence. The entire community had vanished. The houses stood empty, the fort was dismantled, and there was no sign of struggle or hurried departure. The only message left for them was a single word carved into a wooden post, Croatone, and the letters CRO carved into a nearby tree. That do not exist, intricate astrological charts of unknown constellations, and delicate drawings of women bathing in interconnected, vibrant green pools. But it is the text that truly confounds, page after page of elegant, unknown characters flowing in a script that has defied every expert for centuries. This is the Voynich Manuscript, named for Wilfrid Voynich, the rare book dealer who discovered it in 1912. From that moment, it became a siren call for the world's greatest codebreakers, including teams from both world wars who had cracked formidable military ciphers, yet all were defeated by its pages. The manuscript behaves like a genuine language, with statistical patterns and word structures that feel intentional, not random. But if it is a language, it is one spoken by no known civilization. The most advanced artificial intelligence systems have been trained on its symbols, searching for a hidden key, but they too have produced no translation, only more speculation. Is it an encoded scientific text, hiding advanced botanical or astronomical knowledge behind a cipher? Could it be an invented language, a philosophical or religious work meant only for initiates? Or, as some argue, is it an incredibly elaborate and expensive hoax from the Renaissance, crafted to fool a wealthy patron? That last theory is challenged by the sheer consistency and cost of the work, the precise illustrations and hundreds of pages of meticulously drawn text, a monumental effort for a mere forgery. Each generation brings new tools to the puzzle, from spectral imaging to complex linguistic models, and each generation walks away with the same profound respect for its secrecy. The Voynich Manuscript stands as a humbling monument to the limits of our understanding. It is a tangible object we can hold, yet its meaning floats perpetually beyond our grasp, reminding us that some stories are written not to be told, but to be wondered at. What does it say about human curiosity that we are drawn so powerfully to a secret we may never learn? The silence of an unreadable book gives way to the staggering, undeniable presence of stone. On the sands of the Giza Plateau stands a monument so immense, so precise, that it seems to challenge the very timeline of human achievement. Built around 2,560 years before the Common Era, the Great Pyramid was originally 481 feet tall, composed of over 2 million individual limestone and granite blocks. Each of these stones weighs on average 2.5 tons, with some of the interior granite slabs exceeding 50 tons. The numbers are difficult to grasp, but the reality is even more profound. This colossal structure is aligned to the 4 cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, with an error margin of less than 1/15 of a single degree. How did a society without iron tools, without the wheel, and without modern mathematics or engineering accomplish this? The theories are as massive as the pyramid itself. One prevailing idea involves an intricate ramp system, spiraling around the rising structure or built straight against its face, allowing workers to drag the blocks upward. Yet the logistics are mind-boggling, requiring a ramp of immense volume and stability that would arguably be as large an engineering project as the pyramid. Others suggest an internal ramp, a corkscrew tunnel within the pyramid's own growing body, a clever solution that leaves little evidence behind. Then there is the human element, the highly organized labor force of thousands, not slaves as once thought, but likely skilled workers and farmers during the Nile's flood season, motivated by duty, faith, and community. But even with a vast workforce, the precision remains the true mystery. The pyramid's sides are not just aligned to north, they are nearly perfectly square, with a difference in length between sides of less than 0.2%. This speaks to a level of surveying and applied geometry that seems almost anachronistic. While its role as a resting place for Pharaoh Khufu is widely accepted, the structure's design suggests a purpose far beyond a simple tomb. Its air shafts align with specific stars, its dimensions may encode mathematical constants, and its very form seems to be a gateway between the Earth and the cosmos. This monument forces a humbling question: are we looking at the peak of a known civilization's capability, or are we seeing the last remnant of a much older, lost understanding? The Great Pyramid does not whisper its secrets like a manuscript. It shouts them in a language of geometry and stone that we are still struggling to translate. What does such a perfect alignment with the stars tell us about what its builders truly valued? The same impulse to align with the heavens is carved into the windswept plains of southern England. Rising from the grass of Salisbury Plain is a circle of colossal stones, some standing, some lying as lintels across their partners, a silent ring that has watched over 5,000 years of human history. This is Stonehenge, a monument built in stages beginning around 3,000 years before the Common Era, a project that spanned generations. Its construction is a mystery of both engineering and intent. The largest stones, the sarsens, weigh up to 50 tons and were dragged from quarries over 20 miles away. But the smaller, distinctive blue stones present an even greater puzzle, their geological origin traced to the Preseli Hills in Wales, a staggering distance of over 150 miles. Imagine the sheer will required to move these multi-ton stones across rivers, through forests, and over hills, using only Neolithic technology, ropes, and wooden rollers. This monumental effort tells us one thing for certain: Stonehenge was not a casual undertaking. It was of profound, essential importance to the people who built it. But what was that importance? The most visible clue is its alignment. At dawn on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, the sun rises directly over the heel stone and casts its light into the heart of the circle. This precise orientation is no accident. It speaks to a deep, sophisticated observation of the solar cycle. Many believe it was a prehistoric astronomical observatory, a colossal calendar in stone marking the seasons crucial for planting and harvest. Yet to call it merely an observatory feels insufficient. The site is also a final resting place for cremated remains, with numerous burial mounds surrounding it, suggesting a powerful link to ancestry and the journey after life. Other theories propose it was a place of healing, its blue stones believed to hold curative powers, drawing pilgrims from across the land. Perhaps it was all these things, a sacred space where science, spirituality, and community converged. It was likely a temple where the cycles of the sun, the moon, and human life were ceremonially woven together. The true meaning of Stonehenge is layered, each theory a different thread in the same tapestry. We see the physical achievement, the aligned stones, but the spiritual resonance, the chants, the ceremonies, the beliefs that motivated such a sacrifice of labor have evaporated into time. It stands as a testament to a communal vision so powerful it commanded centuries of work, a vision we can measure in stone but can only feel in the silent, awe-inspiring space between those stones. What does it say about a culture that its greatest investment was not in a fortress or a palace, but in a circle open to the sky? But the idea of a lost civilization swallowed by the sea is not confined to ancient stones on land. It lives most vividly in a story told by a philosopher over 2,000 years ago. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, written around 360 years before the Common Era, Plato described a powerful island empire called Atlantis. He wrote of a society advanced beyond its time, rich with precious metals, possessing sophisticated architecture and engineering, and holding dominion over lands beyond its shores. But this greatness was corrupted by pride and ambition, and the gods, in their judgment, sent earthquakes and floods that sank the entire island into the Atlantic Ocean in a single day and night of misfortune. Plato presented this story not as a myth, but as a historical account passed down through generations, a cautionary tale about the fall of a great power due to its own moral decay. This single origin has fueled an endless quest. Was Atlantis a real place? Scholars have debated for centuries. Some argue it is pure philosophical fiction, an allegory Plato invented to illustrate his ideas about the ideal state and the dangers of hubris. Others believe it could be a distorted memory of a real catastrophic event. The leading candidate is the massive volcanic eruption on the island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, around the 16th century before the Common Era. This cataclysm devastated the sophisticated Minoan civilization on nearby Crete with tsunamis and ash, an event that could have lived on in legend as a great kingdom vanishing beneath the waves. Yet the search has expanded far beyond the Mediterranean. Over the years, passionate researchers have proposed locations for Atlantis in the Caribbean, near the Azores, off the coast of Spain, and even in Antarctica, each theory interpreting geographical clues from Plato's descriptions in a new way. Despite these efforts, and despite modern sonar surveys of ocean floors, no definitive archaeological evidence has ever emerged. No sunken city with distinct Atlantean pillars has been found. This absence of proof, however, has done nothing to dim the legend's power. The enduring appeal of Atlantis speaks to something deep within us, a fascination with the idea that entire chapters of human achievement could be erased by time and catastrophe. It represents the ultimate what-if, a blank space on the map where we can project our wonder about advanced ancient knowledge and our own fragility. This mystery lives in the space between history and folklore, a reminder that some stories, whether born from truth or imagination, sink their roots so deep into our culture that they become a kind of truth themselves. What does our relentless search for a city that may never have existed reveal about our desire to find meaning in the deep, both in the ocean and in our own past? The shadow of a sunken empire gives way to a different kind of darkness, one that clung to the narrow alleys of a single London neighborhood. In the autumn of 1888, the district of Whitacapel was a place of crushing poverty, where the glow of gas lamps did little to pierce the thick, persistent fog. It was here that a figure known only as Jack the Ripper carried out a series of violent acts that would freeze a city in fear. Over a few short months, at least 5 individuals, all women living in difficult circumstances, lost their lives. The nature of these events and the killer's deliberate taunts, sent in letters to newspapers and police, created a public panic unlike any before. The name Jack the Ripper, plucked from one of those chilling letters, became a specter haunting the modern world. What makes this mystery endure is not the horror, but the profound silence that followed the storm. Scotland Yard launched one of the most extensive investigations of the Victorian age, interviewing thousands, following countless leads, and yet the killer vanished as completely as he appeared. The case file is a monument to frustration, filled with potential suspects but devoid of conclusive proof. Was it a local tradesman with specific anatomical knowledge? A disturbed individual from a much higher social class, as some theories suggested? The list of names put forward over the decades is long and varied, each theory an attempt to pin a face to the shadow. But the technology of the time offered little help. No fingerprints could be reliably collected. No DNA evidence existed to be analyzed. The fog of that era was not just meteorological, it was evidential. This absence of a definitive answer has transformed the Ripper from a historical criminal into a cultural archetype. He became the first modern serial killer in the public consciousness, his story dissected in hundreds of books, films, and documentaries. The mystery endures because it represents a perfect historical storm, a brutal crime met with a massive investigation that still fell short. It forces us to confront the limitations of knowledge, even in an age of emerging science and organized police work. The gaslit streets of Whitacapel have long since changed, but the question lingers in the echo of those footsteps, a reminder that some identities are swallowed forever by the past, leaving only a name and an endless trail of speculation. How does an unknown figure come to cast such a long and enduring shadow? While the fog of London obscured a single identity, the clear waters of the Aegean Sea revealed an artifact that rewrote an entire chapter of human ingenuity. In the year 1901, sponge divers exploring a Roman-era shipwreck near the island of Antikythera made a discovery that seemed utterly out of place. Amidst statues and pottery, they recovered a lump of corroded bronze about the size of a large book, encrusted with centuries of sea life. It looked unremarkable, just another piece of ancient scrap. But decades later, when researchers began to carefully clean and X-ray this object, they saw something that should not have existed. Inside were dozens of intricate, interlocking bronze gears, precisely cut and arranged in a complex system. This was the Antikythera Mechanism, a device crafted around 100 years before the Common Era, and it has been called the world's first known analog computer. Its purpose was not to calculate sums, but to model the cosmos. By turning a hand crank on the side, the user could advance a series of dials and pointers on the front and back faces. These moving parts would predict the positions of the sun and the moon, the phases of the lunar cycle, and even the timing of solar and lunar eclipses years in advance. One dial tracked the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. Another appeared to model the irregular orbit of the planet Venus. This was not a tool for simple timekeeping. It was a portable, mechanical representation of the heavens, a demonstration of profound astronomical understanding engineered into bronze. The sophistication is staggering. The gear ratios required to accurately mimic the moon's subtle wobble in its orbit involve mathematical concepts like prime numbers in their design, a level of mechanical engineering that historians believe did not emerge until the great clockworks of the 14th century in Europe. For over 1,000 years, this knowledge was simply gone. Who built this marvel? The leading theory points to the great minds of the Hellenistic world, perhaps linked to the school of thought centered in Rhodes, a known hub of astronomy and engineering. Names like Hipparchus, the father of trigonometry, are whispered in connection to the mathematics behind the gears, but the mechanism itself is anonymous, a masterpiece without a signature. Its existence on a Roman ship suggests it was perhaps a commissioned piece, a luxury scientific instrument being transported to a wealthy patron. its very presence challenges a comforting, linear narrative of human progress. We often imagine technology as a straight, upward line from simple to complex. The Antikythera Mechanism shatters that illusion. It shows us a peak of ancient scientific technology that was not surpassed for more than a millennium, a brilliant spark that was somehow extinguished, its secrets sinking not just into the sea, but into the long night of forgotten history. It forces a humbling question: if this one device survived by pure chance, what other inventions, what other leaps of understanding were lost completely in the fires of library burnings, the decay of materials, or the simple erosion of knowledge through time? This single corroded artifact is a message from the past, telling us that our ancestors saw just as far. They simply built their vision in bronze instead of silicon. The Antikythera Mechanism reveals a mind that mapped the stars with gears, but on another continent, an ancient people chose the earth itself as their canvas. Far below the flight path of a modern plane, the Nazca Desert of southern Peru holds a secret that only reveals itself from a vantage point its creators could never have seen. Stretching across nearly 200 square miles of arid plateau are hundreds of immense geoglyphs, lines and shapes scraped into the dark surface of the desert to expose the lighter soil beneath. These are the Nazca Lines, created by the Nazca culture between 500 years before the Common Era and 500 years after. From ground level, they appear as shallow grooves, but from the air, they transform into staggering works of art. A hummingbird with wings outstretched over 300 feet, a spider nearly 150 feet long, a monkey with a spiraling tail. Alongside these intricate biomorphic shapes are miles of perfectly straight lines, trapezoids, and triangles that run for kilometers across the rough terrain, ignoring hills and valleys with geometric precision. The immediate, overwhelming question is how and why. How did a people without flight, without aerial photography or modern surveying tools, design and execute such precise, massive figures that they themselves could never fully see? The method of creation is actually understood. The desert's stable climate and unique surface, a layer of dark oxidized pebbles over light subsoil, made it possible to create lasting designs by simply removing the top layer of stones. Teams of workers using simple tools and ropes could have executed the plans over generations. The greater mystery is the purpose. What vision compelled such a monumental, collaborative effort across centuries? One prominent theory sees the lines as a vast astronomical calendar, with certain shapes and alignments pointing to solstice sunrises or significant stars, potentially guiding agricultural or ceremonial cycles. Another suggests they were sacred pathways, walked during rituals, perhaps as pilgrim routes to ceremonial centers or as processional ways for water deities. Water, or the lack of it, is a constant theme in this desert region, and many researchers believe the lines were part of elaborate ceremonies to summon life-giving rain from the mountains, the animal shapes possibly representing spirits connected to fertility and water. Yet the most captivating idea is that they were messages intended not for human eyes, but for beings in the sky, deities or ancestors who would view them from above. This theory gives the lines a profound spiritual dimension, turning the entire plateau into a temple without walls, a prayer etched into the very skin of the earth. The fact that we now fly over them and see their full glory is a strange twist of fate, a modern technology accidentally fulfilling an ancient intention we can only guess at. The Nazca Lines stand as a testament to a community's unified vision, a shared project so important it defined their landscape for 1,000 years. They challenge our assumptions about art and communication, forcing us to consider that the most powerful messages might be written on a scale so grand they can only be received by the heavens. What does it mean to create a masterpiece you can never behold in its entirety? While the desert held its messages in plain sight, the open ocean kept its secrets beneath the waves. In early December 1872, the British merchant ship Dei Gratia spotted another vessel, the Mary Celeste, drifting aimlessly about 400 miles off the coast of Portugal. The scene was peaceful, even serene, but profoundly wrong. The ship's sails were partially set, some were damaged, and she was listing slightly, yet she was perfectly seaworthy. When the crew of the Dei Gratia boarded, they stepped into a silence more unsettling than any storm. The Mary Celeste was utterly abandoned. Her lifeboat was missing. The crew of 10, along with the captain's wife and 2-year-old daughter, had vanished, but almost everything else remained. Personal belongings, including jewelry and clothing, were undisturbed. The crew's pipes and tobacco were laid out as if they would return any moment. 6 months' worth of food and water were in the hold. The ship's log was intact, with the last entry dated 10 days prior, noting routine weather observations with no hint of distress. There was no sign of a struggle, no evidence of violence or piracy. A single, strange detail stood out. A sword was found lying neatly beneath the captain's bed, and one of the ship's pumps had been disassembled, with a barrel of industrial alcohol in the cargo hold appearing to have been opened. Yet the mystery only deepens with these clues. They point to a sudden, urgent departure, but not to a clear cause. What could have prompted a seasoned captain, Benjamin Briggs, to order his family and crew into a single lifeboat on the open Atlantic, leaving behind a perfectly sound ship? The theories are a catalogue of maritime fear. A sudden, mistaken fear of an imminent explosion from alcohol fumes, leading to a panicked evacuation, is a leading rational explanation. Perhaps a waterspout or a minor seismic event caused unexplained noises that were misinterpreted as the hull breaking apart. Others have suggested mutiny or a brief, violent encounter with pirates who took the people but oddly left all valuables. The era's fascination with the paranormal quickly wove tales of sea monsters, alien abduction, or curses. The official inquiry at the time could find no answer, and no trace of the lifeboat or its passengers was ever found. The ocean gave up the ship but kept the people and their story. The Mary Celeste endures not because of ghoulish details, but because of its haunting normality. It represents the ultimate, what happened next moment, frozen in time. It is a story about the thin line between routine and catastrophe on the vast, indifferent sea, and how quickly a familiar world can become a ghost story. This vessel, found in perfect working order, became the very definition of a ghost ship, a tangible object that offers every clue except the one that matters, whispering that sometimes the most frightening mystery is not what we find, but what we cannot. The silent, drifting deck of the Mary Celeste presents a mystery of absence, but history also records moments of inexplicable presence, where crowds were driven by a force no one could see. In the summer of 1518, the city of Strasbourg, part of the Holy Roman Empire, became the stage for one of the most bewildering events ever documented. It began simply when a woman named Frau Trophia stepped into the street and began to dance. This was not a joyful celebration, but a compulsive, relentless motion she could not stop. She danced for hours, then days, her feet bleeding, her body pushed beyond exhaustion. Authorities, baffled, assumed she would collapse, but instead, something stranger happened. Within a week, dozens of others had joined her. Within a month, the number had swelled to hundreds. The city square turned into a scene of macabre frenzy, with men, women, and children jerking and leaping uncontrollably, some dancing until they fell from sheer fatigue, injury, or worse. Contemporary records note that local doctors ruled out physical or astrological causes, and in a desperate attempt to cure the affliction, town officials even built a stage and hired musicians, believing that allowing the dancers to dance it out might break the spell. This only seemed to intensify the mania. The event, now called the Dancing Plague, lasted for weeks before finally subsiding, leaving a community traumatized and utterly confused by what they had witnessed. The question that has echoed for centuries is simple: what could possibly cause such a thing? Modern scholars look back through the lens of medicine and psychology, offering several theories, though no single answer fits perfectly. One compelling explanation is mass psychogenic illness, a phenomenon where extreme psychological stress manifests as physical symptoms in a group. Strasbourg at the time was facing severe hardship, with famine, disease, and profound social anxiety plaguing the populace. The collective stress may have found release in this shared, hysterical physical outburst, a kind of psychological contagion more powerful than any virus. Another theory points to ergot poisoning, a fungus that grows on damp rye grain, which can cause convulsions, hallucinations, and spasms that might resemble a frenzied dance. Yet this does not fully explain the sustained, coordinated nature of the event or its specific social spread. Some historians see it as a form of religious mania, a collective expression of a desire for penance or ecstatic release, channeled through a culturally understood behavior. The true cause likely sits at the troubling intersection of all these factors, a perfect storm of physiological vulnerability, deep societal fear, and a shared belief system that gave the chaos a form. The dancing plague challenges our neat divisions between mind and body, individual and crowd. It shows us that under immense pressure, a community can physically enact its despair in a way that defies all reason, writing its anguish not in words but in the desperate, exhausting movement of hundreds of feet. This mystery forces us to ask, where does the individual end and the crowd begin when fear takes hold? Hidden among the most famous religious manuscripts ever found is a list written not to save souls but to locate silver. In the mid-1950s, archaeologists exploring a cave near the Dead Sea found 2 rolled sheets of copper, heavily oxidized and fragile. When they were carefully cut open and translated, the text revealed something utterly unexpected. This was the copper scroll, distinct from every other Dead Sea scroll. While its companions were literary and theological works on parchment or papyrus, this document, etched in Hebrew onto metal around the 1st century, was a straightforward, dry inventory. It lists 64 locations, and at each site it claims a specific fortune was buried. The amounts are staggering, described in talents, a biblical unit of weight. The scroll details hundreds of tons of silver and gold, along with precious vessels and priestly vestments. One entry might read, "In the ruin that is in the valley, dig 4 cubits, and there is a chest of silver weighing 17 talents." It reads like a straightforward treasure map, yet its very straightforwardness is the core of the mystery. If this was a real inventory of the temple's wealth, hidden before the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE, why was it recorded on durable, expensive copper and left in a cave? And if the treasure was real, why has none of it ever been recovered, despite numerous expeditions over the decades? The landscape has changed dramatically in 2,000 years, with erosion, earthquakes, and human activity obscuring the landmarks described. Some scholars argue the scroll is allegorical, perhaps listing symbolic tithes or ritual objects, not literal buried coins and ingots. Others propose it could be folklore, a piece of imaginative fiction, or a copy of a well-known legend from the time. Yet the mundane, specific nature of the list, with its precise weights and oddly described locations, argues against pure symbolism. It feels like a set of instructions meant for someone who already knew the general area. This leads to the tantalizing possibility that the treasure was found long ago, perhaps by Romans or later inhabitants, and the scroll is simply a forgotten record of a successful recovery. But the complete absence of any corroborating historical mention of such a find keeps the hope and the hunt alive. Modern treasure hunters and archaeologists have used the scroll as a guide, employing ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery to search the harsh Judean wilderness. While a few small, ancient artifacts have been found in the general regions mentioned, nothing approaching the described fortunes has ever surfaced. The copper scroll sits at a fascinating crossroads where faith meets fortune, and where a spiritual community's possible effort to preserve its physical wealth becomes one of history's greatest unsolved puzzles. It asks us whether the greatest value of a treasure map lies in the treasure itself, or in the endless quest it inspires. What does it mean when a sacred landscape is also described as a hiding place for unimaginable material wealth? Deep in the Siberian wilderness, a single morning rewrote our understanding of the sky's power. At 7:17 a.m. on June 30th, 1908, a fireball brighter than the sun streaked across the heavens above the Tunguska River basin. Moments later, a shockwave of unimaginable force ripped through the air, flattening an estimated 80 million trees across 800 square miles of remote forest. The blast was so immense it registered on barometric instruments as far away as England, and the night skies across Europe and Asia glowed for weeks with strange, luminous clouds. Eyewitness accounts from dozens of miles away described a column of blue light, a searing heat, and a series of thunderous roars that knocked people off their feet. The energy released is now estimated to have been 1,000 times greater than the atomic device used on Hiroshima decades later. Yet when the first scientific expedition reached the site nearly 20 years later, led by Leonid Kulik, they found a scene of breathtaking devastation but no answer. The trees were all flattened radially outward from a central point, but at that epicenter, a few skeletal trunks remained standing, stripped of their branches. Most perplexing of all, there was no impact crater. The ground was scarred with small, marshy depressions, but no giant hole where a massive rock from space should have struck. This absence is the core of the enduring mystery. Without a crater or any sizable fragments, what exactly caused the Tunguska event? The prevailing scientific theory is an airburst. A relatively small object, perhaps a stony asteroid or a fragile comet nucleus roughly 200 feet across, entered Earth's atmosphere at tremendous speed. The intense pressure and heat of entry caused it to explode in the sky, several miles above the ground, releasing all its colossal kinetic energy in a single, devastating flash and shockwave. This would explain the radial forest damage and the lack of a traditional crater, but confirming this has been frustratingly difficult. Expeditions have sifted the soil and peat bogs for over a century, finding microscopic silicate and metallic spherules that hint at a cosmic origin, but no large, definitive fragments of the parent body. Alternative explanations have filled the void of proof, from a small black hole passing through the Earth to the explosive release of a natural gas pocket, though these lack credible evidence. The Tunguska event stands as the largest recorded impact event in human history, a stark day to point in our planet's long story of cosmic collisions. It was a dramatic warning shot, a reminder that our world exists in an active shooting gallery of solar system debris. Had the object's trajectory been different, arriving just a few hours later in its rotation, it could have obliterated a major European city. This mystery, therefore, is not just about a past explosion, but about our future preparedness. It underscores a critical gap in our knowledge and our planetary defense, urging constant vigilance of the near-Earth objects that cross our path. The silent, flattened forest of Tunguska is a monument to a very real vulnerability, a place where the cosmos reached down and left a signature we are still struggling to fully read. The silent forests of Tunguska speak of immense, impersonal forces, but a small clay jar from a museum shelf whispers a much more intimate question about human ingenuity. Unearthed in 1936 near Baghdad, this unassuming artifact looks at first glance like a simple vessel for storing scrolls. It is a clay jar about 5 inches tall, dating from the Parthian or Sasanian era, somewhere between 250 years before the Common Era and 650 years after. But inside, archaeologists found a surprising assembly, a copper cylinder, soldered with a lead and tin alloy housing a single iron rod. The rod was suspended in the center by an asphalt stopper, which also sealed the top, perfectly insulating the two metals from each other. To the German archaeologist Wilhelm Koenig, who studied it, the arrangement was eerily familiar. It looked for all the world like a simple electrochemical cell. When filled with an acidic or alkaline liquid like vinegar or grape juice, the jar could have produced a small but measurable electric current, around 1 volt. This object, dubbed the Baghdad Battery, proposes a staggering idea that someone in ancient Mesopotamia may have harnessed a basic form of electricity over 1,000 years before scientists like Alessandro Volta invented the modern battery in the year 1800. The implications are electrifying in every sense. What could this current have been used for? The most cited theory is electroplating, the process of using electricity to bond a thin layer of gold or silver onto another metal surface. Artisans of the time were masters of gilding and silvering objects, and while they had chemical methods, a weak electrical current could have provided a more controlled technique. Another possibility is its use in medicine, as mild electric shocks were documented in Greek and Roman times for therapeutic purposes, to numb pain or treat ailments. A single jar would produce only a tingle, but several linked together could create a more substantial sensation. Yet the mystery is not solved by its potential function alone. The great debate hinges on intent. Many respected archaeologists maintain that the jar's primary purpose was far more mundane, a secure container for precious scrolls, with the iron rod simply being a rolled parchment or leather document that decayed away, leaving only its metal core. The asphalt seal, in this view, was just a practical lid. This is the central conflict. Is the Baghdad Battery a brilliant, misinterpreted invention? Or are we seeing a modern idea projected onto an ancient storage jar? The evidence is tantalizing but incomplete. No wires have been found with such jars, nor have any electroplated objects from the period been conclusively proven to have used an electrical method. It exists in an evidential vacuum, a solitary, suggestive artifact without a clear context. This very isolation is what makes it so compelling. It challenges our linear narrative of scientific progress, the comfortable story that electricity was discovered in the 18th century. It suggests instead that the spark of discovery may have flickered independently in different times and places, only to be snuffed out by circumstance, war, or simply the failure of the idea to spread. The Baghdad Battery is a humble monument to a profound what-if. It forces us to look at every ancient artifact with fresh eyes, wondering what other ordinary objects might be the last surviving pieces of an extraordinary, forgotten technology. What other simple jars in other museums hold secrets we have not yet thought to test? The silent, solitary jar of the Baghdad Battery hints at a spark of knowledge that may have glowed and faded, but in another part of the world, a civilization left a statement so vast it could never be ignored. Along the windswept coast of Brittany in France, the landscape itself seems to have been set in a state of permanent, orderly procession. Here, over 3,000 prehistoric standing stones, known as the Carnac Stones, march across the fields in eerie, parallel rows. Erected by Neolithic people beginning around 4,500 years before the Common Era, this is not a single circle, but a sprawling, linear complex stretching for miles. The sheer scale of the site is its first, overwhelming mystery. To position so many massive stones, some weighing tens of tons, into such precise alignments required a society of remarkable coordination, shared purpose, and generational commitment. The effort speaks of a motivation so powerful it shaped the very bedrock of their world. But for what? Walking among these rows today, one feels a sense of deliberate direction, as if the stones are guiding you somewhere, or perhaps guarding something. The most prominent theory sees them as a colossal astronomical calculator. Certain alignments appear to point toward significant solar and lunar positions, much like Stonehenge, suggesting the site could have been used to mark solstices, equinoxes, and eclipse cycles, turning the entire countryside into a sacred almanac for planting, harvest, and ceremony. Other interpretations view the rows as a processional way, a path for religious rituals that connected the living community with the realm of ancestors or deities, with the stones acting as silent participants or markers of sacred space. A more practical theory proposes they served as territorial markers, a visible, immutable declaration of a clan's land and power, meant to be seen and understood for generations. Yet, perhaps the most haunting idea is that the lines themselves held a spiritual power, that the very act of creating order from chaos, of lining up these erratic boulders into perfect files, was a ritual act to bring harmony and protection to the community and its land. The specific cultural meaning, the chants that were sung, the stories told as each stone was raised, have evaporated into the Breton mists. What remains is the physical fact of their ambition, a testament written not on parchment, but in granite. The Carnac Stones do not whisper their secrets, they state them in a language of multitudes and geometry that we can measure but not truly translate. They stand as one of the most extensive megalithic sites on Earth, a silent army whose only order is to remain, compelling us to wonder what vision of the universe was so important it required 3,000 sentinels to stand watch over it for all time. While the stones of Carnac stand in silent, orderly rows, another northern settlement ended not with a statement, but with a slow, quiet fade to silence. On the rugged fjords of Greenland, the Norse settlers, descendants of Vikings, built a life that defied the very edge of the known world. Founded by Eric the Red around 985 CE, these eastern and western settlements grew into thriving communities of several thousand people. They built stone churches, raised livestock, traded walrus ivory and polar bear hides with Europe, and maintained their distinctive Norse identity for over 400 years. Then, by the early 15th century, the last ship from Norway arrived to find only empty farms and echoing longhouses. The Greenland Norse had vanished, leaving no written record of their final days. Their disappearance is not a mystery of a single moment, but of a slow unraveling, a complex puzzle where no single clue provides the full answer. Why would a society that had endured centuries of harsh winters simply cease to exist? The leading suspect is a changing climate. The period known as the Little Ice Age began to grip the North Atlantic around the 1300s, bringing longer, colder winters and shorter growing seasons. This would have made it increasingly difficult to sustain the hay needed for livestock, the very foundation of their Scandinavian way of life. Sea ice increased, potentially blocking crucial trade routes to Iceland and Norway for years at a time, cutting off supplies and contact. At the same time, archaeological evidence suggests their relationship with the environment was fragile. They continued to rely heavily on European-style farming, even as the land degraded from overgrazing and soil erosion. Meanwhile, the Thule Inuit people, ancestors of modern Inuit communities, were moving into the region. Adapted superbly to the Arctic environment with sophisticated hunting technologies like kayaks and harpoons, they thrived where the Norse struggled. Did conflict arise between the two cultures? While some sagas mention skirmishes, there is little archaeological evidence of widespread violence. It is more likely the Norse simply failed to adapt, clinging to traditions that became unsustainable. Another theory points to economic collapse. The European market for walrus ivory, Greenland's primary export, may have dried up or been supplanted by other sources, making their remote outpost no longer worth the perilous supply voyages. Perhaps the final chapter was not a dramatic end, but a gradual decision. Facing isolation, hardship, and a failing way of life, the last generations may have simply chosen to leave, boarding their ships for Iceland or Norway in a slow, final migration, abandoning the stone walls of their churches to the relentless wind. The haunting lesson of the Greenland Norse is that societies do not always fall with a bang. Sometimes they simply stop, their story ending not with a definitive event, but with the last hearth fire going cold, a sobering reminder that resilience is not a permanent state, but a constant negotiation with a changing world. Their empty settlements ask us what it truly means for a culture to reach its end. A single piece of linen measuring about 14 feet long holds an image that has divided opinion for centuries. Known as the Shroud of Turin, this cloth bears the faint, straw-colored imprint of a man who appears to have endured the physical trauma of crucifixion. The markings correspond to wounds described in biblical accounts, from scourge marks on the back to a puncture in the wrist. For many of the faithful, this is not just an artifact but a sacred relic, the actual burial shroud of Jesus Christ, bearing a miraculous impression from the moment of resurrection. Its documented history begins in the 1350s in Liéry, France, but its journey before that is lost to time, a blank space that invites both devotion and intense scrutiny. The central question is deceptively simple: what created this image? The cloth itself is a genuine medieval textile, as confirmed by a widely publicized radiocarbon dating test in 1988 that placed its origin between 1260 and 1390. This scientific verdict seemed to settle the matter, declaring it a creation of the Middle Ages. Yet the mystery refused to dissolve. Researchers questioned the tested sample, noting it might have been taken from a medieval repair patch rather than the original cloth, potentially skewing the date. More compelling were the image's bizarre physical properties, which no medieval forger could have likely produced. The coloration is not a painted pigment but a subtle chemical change in the topmost fibers of the linen, as if the cloth was lightly scorched. The image contains precise three-dimensional information, meaning the intensity of the stain correlates perfectly with the distance between the cloth and the body it would have covered, a feature only discovered with modern photographic analysis in the 19th century. No known artistic technique from any era, let alone the 14th century, can account for this. How could a medieval artist paint a perfect, anatomically correct negative image that only reveals its full detail as a photographic positive, and encode within it accurate spatial data they had no concept of? Alternative scientific explanations have been proposed, ranging from a natural chemical reaction between spices used in burial and ammonia vapors, to a burst of radiant energy from a body. Each theory attempts to bridge the gap between the carbon date and the inexplicable image, but none have been conclusively proven or replicated in full. The shroud exists in a liminal space, a tangible object that seems to defy the very tools we use to understand history. It challenges the boundary between faith and empirical evidence, asking whether they must always be in opposition. For some, it is a profound symbol; for others, a puzzle that redefines the possible. This artifact compels us to confront how we weigh material science against the power of a mystery that, for millions, is not a question to be solved, but a truth to be revered. Its enduring fascination lies not in providing an answer, but in holding two very different kinds of certainty in a fragile, lasting tension. Isolated in the vast blue expanse of the Pacific Ocean, Easter Island is a speck of land over 2,000 miles from the nearest continent. Here, the Rapa Nui people performed one of history's most astonishing acts of communal will. Between 1250 and 1500 CE, they carved nearly 900 colossal stone figures, the Moai, from the volcanic rock of a single quarry. These statues, some standing over 30 feet tall and weighing more than 80 tons, were then moved miles across the island's rugged terrain to massive stone platforms called ahu, where they were erected to face inland, watching over the clans. The central mystery is not the carving, impressive as it is, but the journey. How did a society without the wheel, without metal tools, and without large draft animals transport these multi-ton giants? For decades, the dominant theory involved log rollers and sledges, a method requiring vast quantities of timber. This idea fed directly into a powerful, cautionary narrative about the island's fate, that the Rapa Nui, in their zeal to carve and move statues, deforested their entire island, triggering ecological and social collapse. Recent experimental archaeology, however, has revealed a more dynamic and ingenious possibility. Researchers working with a concrete replica demonstrated that a modest team using only ropes could make a Moai walk. By rocking the statue from side to side and carefully pulling forward with coordinated tugs, they could maneuver it upright in a swaying, forward motion. This method, which aligns with local oral traditions, suggests the statues might have moved with a rhythmic, almost living gait across the landscape. The story of the society's end is also being carefully re-examined. While deforestation certainly occurred, likely from a combination of statue transport, clearing land for agriculture, and the arrival of invasive rats that prevented forest regrowth, it was likely not the sole cause of hardship. The arrival of Europeans brought devastating new illnesses, and the tragic period of slave raiding in the 1800s further fractured the community. The Moai, then, are not simply tombstones for a fallen society. They are a profound testament to what a unified culture can achieve, a physical manifestation of ancestral reverence and clan identity. Their silent gaze asks us to consider a more complex equation, where human ambition, environmental change, and external forces intertwine. They remind us that a society's legacy is not written in a single act, but in the enduring stones they left behind and the nuanced story of resilience and challenge those stones represent. What does the journey of a statue tell us about the balance between a culture's dreams and the world that sustains it? The silent, enduring statues of Easter Island stand in defiance of their isolation, but another stretch of ocean has become synonymous with a very different kind of defiance, the defiance of explanation. Between the points of Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico lies a vast expanse of the Western Atlantic that has entered modern folklore as the Bermuda Triangle. This region, also known as the Devil's Triangle, gained its fearsome reputation in the mid-20th century, fueled by reports of ships and aircraft vanishing without a trace, often in calm weather and without sending a distress signal. The most famous cases, like the disappearance of Flight 19 in 1945, a squadron of 5 U.S. Navy bombers on a training mission, along with the rescue plane sent to find them, have cemented its place in our collective imagination. The pilot's final, confused radio transmissions spoke of compasses spinning uncontrollably and the ocean looking strange, not right, adding layers of eerie detail that seemed to beg for a supernatural answer. Yet when we pull back from the legend and examine the historical record with a clear eye, a different pattern emerges. The Bermuda Triangle is one of the most heavily traveled shipping and flight corridors in the world. Given the sheer volume of traffic over decades, the number of incidents attributed to it is not statistically higher than in any other similarly busy part of the ocean. The U.S. Coast Guard and global insurance agencies do not recognize it as a uniquely hazardous zone. So what explains the disappearances that did occur? Maritime and aviation experts point to a confluence of very real, very dangerous natural factors. The area is prone to sudden, violent storms that can form and dissipate quickly, catching vessels off guard. It is also home to the deep Puerto Rico Trench, where a disabled ship could sink to depths that make recovery nearly impossible. Furthermore, the region has documented instances of rogue waves, walls of water over 100 feet tall that can appear without warning and overwhelm even large ships. Compass anomalies are also a genuine phenomenon here, as it is one of the few places on Earth where true north and magnetic north align. which can cause navigational confusion if not properly accounted for. Human error, mechanical failure, and the simple, immense power of the sea provide rational explanations for most, if not all, of the tragedies. The enduring mystery, then, is not about the events themselves, but about us. Why does this particular patch of blue water hold such power over our minds? The Bermuda Triangle is a masterclass in how a modern myth is constructed. It is born from the potent combination of rare but tragic real-world events, the natural human desire to find patterns and meaning in misfortune, and the amplifying power of sensational storytelling in books, magazines, and later, television and film. Each retelling adds another layer, smoothing over the mundane explanations and emphasizing the eerie, until the legend becomes more solid than the facts. This process challenges our relationship with the unknown. It reveals how we often prefer a compelling mystery to a complicated, tragic truth. The ocean is inherently vast and dangerous, a fact that can feel impersonal and frightening. The idea of a mysterious zone where the normal rules of physics break down offers a more narratively satisfying, if more terrifying, framework. The Bermuda Triangle, therefore, is less a geographical puzzle and more a psychological one. It holds up a mirror to our need for wonder and our struggle to accept that sometimes the most profound forces at work are not supernatural, but simply natural, immense, and indifferent. This legend asks us to consider where we draw the line between a genuine historical enigma and a story we have collectively chosen to believe. While legends are born from the sea, a different kind of puzzle was being mailed through the postal system. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, the San Francisco Bay Area was gripped by a chilling game of cat and mouse. A figure calling himself the Zodiac Killer claimed responsibility for a series of violent acts, but it was his written communications that cemented his place in infamy. He sent taunting letters to local newspapers, each often accompanied by a block of cryptic symbols, a cipher he dared the authorities and the public to solve. These were not simple substitution codes, but complex puzzles designed to showcase his intellect and to mock the very system trying to catch him. The public fear was palpable, a modern community held hostage by an unseen mind that seemed to treat murder and terror as a twisted intellectual sport. In one of his first letters, he included a three-part cipher. Law enforcement and amateur codebreakers scrambled, and a married couple, Donald and Betty Harden, successfully cracked the main section. It revealed a narcissistic, bragging rant, but no clear identity. Another cipher, known as the 340 cipher for its length, remained unbroken for over 50 years, a silent testament to the killer's cunning. Then, in 2020, a team of private citizens made a breakthrough. Using advanced computational power and careful analysis, they deciphered the 340 cipher. Its message was another taunt, filled with misspellings and bizarre phrasing, claiming the killer was not afraid of the gas chamber and that his victims would become his slaves in the afterlife. While this decryption was a monumental achievement, it did not reveal a name or a clear location. It only gave more voice to the killer's disturbing psyche. Other ciphers he sent remain unsolved to this day, their grids of symbols an ongoing challenge to the global community of cryptographers who dedicate their time to unlocking them. The hunt for the killer's identity has been just as complex. Over the decades, police have investigated thousands of leads and named several persons of interest. One prominent suspect was Arthur Lee Allen, a man who came under suspicion for circumstantial evidence and was questioned extensively, but conclusive proof never materialized. Another name, recently publicized by a group of independent investigators, points to a different individual, but this too remains unconfirmed by official sources. The case remains open, a cold file that continues to generate theories, books, and documentaries. The Zodiac's legacy is a dual one, a story of crime and a story of code. It exemplifies how a modern mystery can be engineered to persist, its clues embedded not just in physical evidence, but in the abstract realm of language and symbol. In the digital age, this decades-old paper trail has found new life online, where forums buzz with collaborative efforts to crack the remaining puzzles. This enduring fascination speaks to a fundamental human drive to solve, to understand, and to bring order to chaos. The Zodiac left behind a perverse monument built from fear and arrogance, but the response has been a persistent, collective effort to reclaim the narrative, to solve the puzzle he thought would forever prove his superiority. It is a stark reminder that some of the darkest shadows are cast not by actions alone, but by the enigmatic silence of symbols left deliberately unresolved. The haunting silence of an unsolved cipher gives way to a legend whispered in the hushed corridors of power, a story not of a single text, but of an entire library that vanished into the earth. Deep beneath the stone foundations of the Moscow Kremlin, or perhaps hidden in a forgotten network of tunnels elsewhere in Russia, a treasure of unimaginable intellectual wealth is said to wait. This is the legendary lost library of the Moscow Tsars, often called the Library of Ivan the Terrible. Its story begins with the marriage of Ivan III to Sophia Paleologina, a niece of the last Byzantine emperor in the 15th century. She is believed to have brought with her a priceless dowry of ancient Greek and Roman manuscripts, salvaged from the falling empire, texts that had survived the centuries only to travel to the cold north. This collection was then expanded dramatically by her grandson, Ivan IV, known as Ivan the Terrible, a Tsar who was both a brutal ruler and a deeply learned man, fascinated by theology, history, and the occult. He reportedly gathered books from across his realm and through diplomatic channels, amassing a library said to rival the great collections of the ancient world, containing lost plays by Sophocles, unknown histories by Livy, and perhaps even arcane wisdom from distant lands. Then, after Ivan's passing in 1584, the entire collection disappeared from all records. The silence was absolute. For centuries, the legend persisted, fueled by tantalizing fragments. In the 18th century, a German pastor claimed to have seen a catalogue of the library in a Russian archive, describing shelves filled with classic works thought gone forever. Expeditions have been mounted from the time of Peter the Great to modern archaeological surveys, using ground-penetrating radar to search the labyrinthine depths beneath the Kremlin and other suspected sites like the old city of Alexandrov. Yet each search has ended in frustration, finding tunnels, chambers, and hidden rooms, but no library. This profound absence fuels the great debate. Was it a real physical archive that was simply dispersed, its books quietly absorbed into other collections or destroyed by fire and damp over the centuries? Or is it a powerful myth, a bibliographic phantom born from national pride and the human longing for lost wisdom? The library's allure is not merely about the value of the books themselves, but about the doors they could unlock. Each lost text is a missing piece in the grand mosaic of human thought, a chance to hear a voice from antiquity speak directly to us, unmediated by centuries of copying and interpretation. This mystery symbolizes the ultimate fragility of knowledge, the sobering truth that entire chapters of our collective story can be misplaced, not through malice, but through the slow, indifferent passage of time. It asks a poignant question: what greater treasures have we already lost, without even a legend to remind us they were ever there? The yearning to find a lost library is a search for connection, a desire to hear the direct voice of the past. But we need not always search in hidden vaults, for some of the most profound messages from our ancestors are written across the sky itself, encoded in the silent alignment of stone. From the Great Pyramid of Giza to the Avenue of the Dead at Teotihuacan in Mexico, ancient monuments around the world share a startling feature: their precise orientation to celestial bodies. On specific days, the sun, moon, or particular stars rise or set in perfect alignment with a temple doorway, along a central causeway, or over a distant marker stone. The summer solstice sunrise at Stonehenge is the most famous example, but it is far from alone. At the Temple of Carnac in Egypt, the axis of the Great Sanctuary aligns with the midwinter sunset. The Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan is oriented to the setting sun on specific days that mark the agricultural cycle. These are not rough approximations, but measurements of astonishing accuracy, often within fractions of a degree. This consistent pattern across continents and cultures presents a compelling mystery. Did builders separated by oceans and millennia independently discover the same celestial mechanics? Or does this speak to a shared, fundamental human impulse? The most straightforward explanation is intentional design. For agricultural societies, tracking the sun's journey was a matter of survival, marking the seasons for planting and harvest. A stone calendar that locked in the solstices and equinoxes was a practical, vital tool. Beyond practicality, the celestial bodies were deities, ancestors, or powerful spirits. Aligning a temple to capture the first ray of the solstice sun was a way to commune with the divine, to harness its power, or to demonstrate a ruler's sacred connection to the cosmic order. The precision, then, was an act of both science and profound faith. Yet a skeptical view asks whether we see patterns where none were intended. With thousands of ancient sites, some will inevitably align with significant celestial points by random chance. Are we, with our modern knowledge of astronomy, projecting meaning onto structures that were oriented for simpler reasons, like following the local landscape or a prevailing wind? The evidence, however, leans heavily toward intention. At many sites, the alignment is not a single lucky orientation, but part of a complex, integrated design. The three pyramids of Giza are arranged to mirror the three stars of Orion's belt. The Nazca Lines include clear astronomical markers alongside their animal figures. This suggests a coordinated vision, not happenstance. The global similarity could point to independent discovery, a natural result of different cultures asking the same fundamental questions about their world and looking to the same sky for answers. The human mind, observing the predictable cycles of the heavens, would naturally seek to mark and honor them in the most permanent way possible, with stone. This mystery ultimately transcends engineering and enters the realm of human consciousness. It suggests that long before written history, people across the globe shared a common language, not of words, but of observation and reverence. They looked up, saw order in the cosmos, and felt compelled to mirror that order on Earth, to build their sacred spaces as portals between the terrestrial and the celestial. The silent stones, waiting for the sun to kiss them on one specific morning each year, are a testament to a universal quest for meaning, a desire to find our place not just on the land, but within the grand, turning machinery of the universe itself. Amidst the celestial alignments of kings and temples, a far more intimate drama unfolded within the cold stone walls of a London fortress. In the spring of 1483, the political landscape of England shifted with a sudden, ruthless jolt. King Edward IV passed away, leaving the throne to his 12-year-old son, Edward V. The boy king and his younger brother, 9-year-old Richard of Shrewsbury, were placed in the royal lodgings of the Tower of London, ostensibly for their protection and to prepare for the coronation. Their guardian was their uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. What happened next is a masterclass in political maneuvering. Parliament declared the boys illegitimate, citing a previously overlooked issue with their parents' marriage. With a path cleared, their uncle was crowned King Richard III. The two princes, now legally barred from the throne, remained in the tower, and then they simply vanished from public view. By that autumn, they were never seen again. Their fate became the most poignant, unresolved question in English history, a ghost story woven into the very fabric of the monarchy. The immediate suspicion fell and has remained for centuries upon Richard III. He had the motive, the opportunity, and the ruthless reputation. By removing the legitimate heirs, he secured his own crown and eliminated a potent rallying point for rebellion. Contemporary sources from just a few years after the events began to whisper of their untimely end. Yet there is a compelling counterargument. Richard had already secured the throne through legal means, and the boys, publicly declared bastards, were far less of a political threat alive under his control than as martyrs. Their disappearance, in fact, sparked the very rumors that would plague his reign and contribute to his defeat by Henry Tudor, who became Henry VII. This shifts suspicion to the new Tudor king. Henry had an equally powerful motive to ensure the princes never resurfaced to challenge his own dubious claim. He could have quietly given the order after taking power, framing his fallen rival for the crime. Other theories suggest a noble acting independently, or even that one of the boys survived in secret, though these lack strong evidence. The physical evidence is as haunting as the historical record. In 1674, during renovations at the tower, workers discovered a wooden chest buried beneath a stone staircase. Inside were the small skeletal remains of two children. King Charles II, believing them to be the lost princes, had the bones placed in an urn in Westminster Abbey, where they rest today. Modern science has longed to examine them, but permission has never been granted. Without DNA testing and forensic analysis, we cannot confirm their age, sex, relationship, or cause of passing. They are a silent, frustrating clue, a potential key to the mystery that remains forever locked away. This absence of proof is what keeps the debate passionately alive, transforming a historical event into an enduring whodunit. The tragedy of the princes transcends a simple crime. It is a human story of lost childhood, set against the brutal chessboard of medieval power. It illustrates how the grand narratives of kings and battles can hinge on the fragile lives of the innocent, and how those lives, when snuffed out in shadow, leave behind not just a political vacuum, but a legacy of profound sorrow and speculation. Their story has inspired Shakespeare's brilliant villain, countless novels, and endless scholarly debate, proving that some mysteries are powerful not because they can be solved, but because they force us to confront the darkest costs of ambition and the enduring echo of a silence that was never meant to be broken. A parchment chart from the Ottoman court holds a coastline that should not exist. In 1513, the admiral and cartographer Piri Reis compiled a world map, drawing upon sources he openly cited in his notes, including charts from Christopher Columbus and ancient Greek and Arabic works. The resulting map, a fragment of which survives today in Istanbul, is a stunning artifact of its time, showing the Atlantic and the coastlines of Europe, Africa, and the newly encountered Americas with remarkable skill. But one detail stops historians in their tracks. At the southern edge of the map lies a landmass, its northern coastline depicted with startling clarity, that bears a haunting resemblance to the continent of Antarctica, specifically the Queen Maud Land region. This is impossible according to conventional history. Antarctica was not officially sighted until 1820, over 300 years later, and its coastline has been concealed under thousands of feet of ice for millions of years. How could a 16th century admiral, using the tools of his age, possibly chart a land buried in perpetual frost? The immediate, dramatic theories leap to ancient advanced civilizations, perhaps a global seafaring culture with technology lost to time, who mapped the world before the last great ice age. Others, venturing further, suggest the knowledge came from outside human history entirely. Yet scholars of cartography offer a more grounded, though no less fascinating, explanation. Piri Reis himself wrote that he used 20 source maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. The idea is that his depiction of the southern land is not Antarctica, but a composite, speculative continent based on these lost charts, perhaps blending real reports of southern land sightings, like the tip of South America, with classical legends of a great southern land, terra australis incognita. The accuracy, they argue, is a coincidence of artistic license and the human tendency to see familiar shapes in ambiguous lines. However, this rational view struggles with the map's specific geographical features. The coastline's contours, when compared to modern seismic surveys of the bedrock beneath the Antarctic ice, show a curious and controversial correspondence, as if the map depicts the continent not as it appears today under ice, but as it might have looked millennia ago when its shores were ice-free. This single observation fuels the enduring debate. Was Piri Reis working from a surviving fragment of an incredibly ancient geographical tradition, a map copied and recopied over centuries, preserving the memory of a world that had changed dramatically? Or are we, like someone seeing a face in the clouds, imposing a modern understanding onto an old map's speculative guesswork? The Piri Reis Map does not offer answers, only a profound provocation. It challenges the neat timeline of the age of exploration, suggesting that the voyages of Columbus and Magellan may not have been the first to connect the world's oceans, but merely the first in a very long time. It whispers of a possibility that human curiosity and capability have cycled through peaks and valleys, that knowledge can be gained, lost in library fires or the slow decay of parchment, and then patiently rediscovered centuries later. This map is a ghost of a possibility, a line on vellum that asks us to consider how much of our past is not just undiscovered, but deliberately forgotten. The silent lines of an ancient map ask if we have forgotten our own world, but a single burst of static from the heavens asks if we are truly alone in it. On the night of August 15, 1977, the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University was performing its routine, automated scan of the sky, listening to the natural radio whispers of the cosmos. The data printed out line by line on simple computer paper, a string of letters and numbers representing signal strength. For the most part, the readout was a predictable sequence of ones and twos, the background murmur of space. Then at 10:16 p.m., the telescope's focused beam passed over a point in the constellation Sagittarius. The printout erupted. For 72 seconds, the signal strength spiked to an intensity 30 times louder than the cosmic background noise, represented by the alphanumeric code 6EQUJ5. It was a narrowband radio transmission, the exact kind scientists predicted an artificial, intelligent signal would be, focused on a specific frequency that natural cosmic objects rarely produce. When astronomer Jerry Amon reviewed the data printout days later, he was so stunned by the perfect, unexpected signature that he simply circled the sequence in red pen and wrote one word in the margin: "Wow." That single, emphatic exclamation gave the signal its enduring name. The search began immediately to find it again, to confirm its origin, but the wow signal never repeated. Not the next night, not the next week, not in the decades of listening that followed. It was a one-time event, a cosmic shout that fell into an eternal silence. The mystery lies in that fleeting nature. If it was a deliberate attempt at communication from another civilization, why would it transmit just once? If it was a natural phenomenon, what in the universe could produce such a powerful, artificial-looking burst on that exact frequency? Scientists have proposed several theories. One suggests it could have been a reflection of a human-made satellite signal, bouncing off a piece of space debris, though the specific frequency used was supposedly protected for astronomy. Another pointed to a passing comet, releasing hydrogen clouds that could emit radio waves, but the comets proposed were not in the right part of the sky at that precise time. Each explanation has faced significant challenges, leaving the signal in a category of its own. For those engaged in the scientific search for extraterrestrial intelligence, the wow signal is not proof, but it is the closest thing to a credible candidate. It is a data point that refuses to be dismissed, a 72-second anomaly that carries the weight of a profound question. It represents the possibility that we were, for one brief moment, listening at exactly the right place and the right time to hear a message not meant for us, or perhaps a beacon that swept past our planet like a lighthouse beam in the galactic dark. Its legacy is not an answer but a sustained curiosity. It reminds us that the universe is vast enough to hold wonders we cannot yet explain, and that the search itself is an act of hope, a way of reaching out with our instruments and our imaginations into the great quiet, waiting to see if anything or anyone might someday say hello again. Sometimes the most unsettling mysteries are not seen but heard. In the quiet high desert of Taos, New Mexico, and in other isolated pockets around the world, a persistent sound troubles the peace. It is known simply as the Taos Hum, a low, rumbling noise often compared to a diesel truck idling in the distance, a vibration felt more in the bones than clearly heard by the ears. But when residents step outside to locate the source, they find nothing. The desert night is silent, the sky clear, and yet the hum persists, a private soundtrack that for some becomes a constant, inescapable presence. What makes this phenomenon so perplexing is its selectivity. Only about 2% of the local population reports hearing it, turning a potential environmental issue into a deeply personal and often isolating experience. For those who perceive it, the hum is not a minor nuisance. It can disrupt sleep, cause headaches, and create a profound sense of unease, knowing that a sound you cannot escape is also one you cannot prove. In the 1990s, the mystery gained enough attention that Congress directed a team of researchers from prestigious national laboratories to investigate. They arrived with sensitive acoustic equipment, determined to capture the hum and trace its origin. They interviewed those who heard it, mapping the experiences in detail. Yet their sophisticated microphones detected nothing out of the ordinary. The sound, so real to the hearers, was invisible to their instruments. This disconnect between subjective experience and objective measurement lies at the heart of the enigma. Without a recording, science struggles to classify it. The leading theories attempt to bridge this gap. One points to very low-frequency sound generated by industrial processes far away, perhaps from mining or military operations, that travels great distances and is amplified by the local topography or atmospheric conditions. Another suggests a geological source, like the subtle, constant seismic hum of the Earth itself, a vibration normally below human perception that some individuals might somehow be tuned to hear. There is also the possibility of a mass psychogenic effect, where the power of suggestion and shared anxiety in a community leads individuals to notice and fixate on normal background noises, interpreting them as a mysterious and intrusive hum. Yet none of these explanations fully satisfy, because none explain why only a specific few are affected, or why the experience is so consistent in its description across different towns and even different countries. The Taos Hum is a reminder that our perception of reality is a fragile, individual construction. It challenges the boundary between the external world and our internal sensory experience, asking whether a phenomenon must be measurable to be real for those who live with it. This audible mystery shows that not all historical puzzles are locked in the past. Some are alive in the present moment, humming just below the surface of everyday life, a quiet testament to the fact that our world still holds frequencies we can feel but not yet understand. These 25 stories, from silent colonies to humming deserts, are not just isolated curiosities. They form a constellation of questions, and when we step back to see their pattern, common threads begin to emerge, weaving through time and across continents. One of the most powerful is the sheer human drive to build, to leave a mark that defies time itself. Consider the Great Pyramid, Stonehenge, and the Moai of Easter Island. These are not mere shelters or tools, they are declarations in stone, projects that demanded generations of shared labor and a unified vision so compelling it could move mountains, or at least multi-ton blocks. They speak to a universal need to reach beyond the everyday, to connect with the cosmos, honor ancestors, or assert identity on a scale that would echo into eternity. Another thread is our profound fascination with disappearance, the chilling void where a story should be. The lost colony of Roanoke, the Mary Celeste, the Greenland Norse, each represents a narrative abruptly cut short, a community or a vessel that steps out of the light and into a permanent shadow. These mysteries tap into a deep-seated fear of the unknown and the unsettling reality that even in our interconnected world, people and entire societies can simply vanish, leaving behind only questions. Then there is the persistent blurring of myth and reality, where legend becomes so powerful it reshapes our search for truth. Atlantis is the prime example, a philosophical allegory that launched 1,000 expeditions. The lost library of the Tsars and the treasures of the Copper Scroll live in this same space, where the tantalizing possibility of a monumental discovery fuels a quest that is as much about our hopes as it is about historical fact. Why do these gaps in our understanding exist so persistently? Often they arise from simple breaks in the chain of evidence, a lost document, a sunken ship, an archaeological site eroded by time. Other times they highlight the limitations of the science available to the people of the era, or even to our own. The true nature of the wow signal or the Taos Hum may simply lie beyond the current reach of our instruments. And perhaps most profoundly, many of these puzzles are rooted in the breathtaking complexity of human behavior and natural phenomena, a combination that can defy easy explanation, as seen in events like the Dancing Plague or the fate of the princes in the tower. What this collective tapestry shows us is that history is not a sealed archive with all the answers neatly filed. It is a living, breathing dialogue. It is an ongoing conversation between the past, which offers clues in stone and parchment, and the present, which brings new tools, new perspectives, and fresh eyes. A single technological advance, like the ability to read a scroll without unrolling it, or to analyze the isotopes in a tooth, can suddenly illuminate a darkness that has lasted for centuries. By engaging with these enigmas, we do more than just satisfy a craving for the strange and mysterious. We train our minds in a vital skill, critical thinking. We learn to weigh fragmentary evidence, to consider multiple interpretations, and to sit comfortably with uncertainty when no single answer presents itself. This intellectual humility is perhaps the greatest gift these mysteries offer, preparing us not just to look back at the shadows of yesterday, but to face the unanswered questions of our own time with a wiser, more discerning gaze. From vanished colonies and indecipherable manuscripts to celestial signals and ancient batteries, the 25 stories we have walked through today form a single, compelling truth. Our past is not a completed puzzle, but a gallery of open doors, each leading to a question that still lacks a definitive answer. These are not failures of history, but its most fascinating feature. They invite us to marvel at the sheer ingenuity that could align pyramids to the stars or carve a computer from bronze 2,000 years ago. They ask us to sit with the profound fear that could drive an entire colony to vanish or a city to dance itself to exhaustion. And they fill us with a sense of wonder that a single, silent hum in the desert or a 72-second burst of cosmic static can redefine what we think is possible. Each mystery, in its own way, is a lesson in humility. They remind us that for all our advanced technology and accumulated knowledge, there are chapters in the human story where the evidence runs cold, where the trail ends, and where we must simply acknowledge the limits of our understanding. This is not a weakness, but a vital part of the journey. It is the blank space on the map that calls the explorer, the unsolved cipher that challenges the codebreaker, the anomalous artifact that makes the scientist look again. That is why these enigmas are far more than footnotes. They are catalysts. The unanswered question of Roanoke drives archaeologists to sift Virginia soil with new tools. The uncracked pages of the Voynich Manuscript inspire linguists and AI researchers to develop new methods of analysis. The fleeting wow signal justifies the continued, hopeful scan of 1 million radio frequencies. They prove that mystery is not an end but a beginning. It inspires the dreamer to imagine, the historian to dig deeper, and the scientist to refine their instruments, all in pursuit of truths that may still, one day, come to light. As we close this particular journey, hold onto that spark of curiosity. History's greatest mysteries are not merely problems waiting for a solution, they are profound reminders. Reminders of the endless depth and variety of human experience, of our relentless drive to build, to explore, and to seek meaning even in the silence. They underscore the universe's boundless capacity to surprise us, to present riddles written in stone, in ink, and in the very fabric of the cosmos. So let these tales linger with you. Let them change how you look at an old map, a full moon, or a silent forest. We want to hear which of these 25 mysteries captured your imagination the most. Was it the silent fate of the Mary Celeste, the celestial ambition of the Antikythera Mechanism, or the haunting legend of Atlantis? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the unknown, subscribe for more journeys to the edges of our understanding. Above all, keep questioning the world around you, because the next great discovery often starts with a simple, wondering why.